We are delighted, by the way, to welcome our next guest. I expect him to be in a suit and tie, and that tie to be of a rather light blue, because he is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK and the new MP for Boston and Skegness, Mr. Richard Tice. A very good evening.
A very good evening to you, and I'm just taking a day or two off, Jeremy.
Oh, well, this is very casual. Even the polo shirt is the Reform blue colour.
Of course, you have to keep up standards.
How are you, my friend? You all right?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, quite a lot going on. Fair bit we can talk about.
But can I just, before we talk about that, so when an MP's on holiday, is it like, I mean, because like I always moan about teachers getting 20 weeks off a year, are you literally, how long have you got off?
Listen, I'm 24/7, 7 days a week is the reality, Jeremy. So the emails don't stop coming in, put it like that.
You don't answer mine anymore. Rich, really good to have you on. Just very quickly, at the top of this story, breaking news this hour, the last hour, the National Police Chiefs Council has just released updated figures for the number of arrests and charges made across the UK since July 29th. I wasn't here. In relation to the riots, of course. 1,024 arrests, 575 charges, which is quite a high proportion of charges against arrests. We haven't spoken since this happened, and I was away and I was sort of gnawing at the bit because I wanted to say so much. I would firstly say to you, and I'd love your take on this, I'll do my best to make it as quick as possible. I don't like what I saw with the police. They're thugs. That's wrong, quite right. But for me, this was politicised by Starmer. He talked about supporting, quite rightly, before anybody jumps in, mosques and Muslims. But he's now saying to anybody who disagrees with the migration situation, who feels, as a caller I had from Wales, an NHS nurse earlier, who said, if I go and protest now, I'm going to be called far right. If the police are able to be that strong, Richard, if they're able to be filmed arresting people at 6 o'clock and we can get them into prison within a day, despite the fact that apparently there weren't any spaces, why the bloody hell don't we do that across the board for knife crime, for drug dealers and for everybody? That's what I want to know.
It's actually very simple, and that is that the rioting, all rioting by anybody, is totally unacceptable, is condemned, and people who break the law rioting and assault police officers, damage property, should all be dealt with appropriately in the usual way. The crucial word here, Jeremy, is equally. Equally and consistently.
Absolutely.
Now, when we had the riots in Hare Hills in Leeds, there were well over 1,000 people, possibly 2,000 people involved. And there was assaulting of police officers, there was burning of cars and buses. And with that well over 1,000 people involved, they've arrested 27 and they've charged 6.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because this is what we have got in the United Kingdom now. We've got two-tier Keir running a two-tier political system with two-tier policing. And it is completely, utterly unacceptable.
Based on what? Two-tier policing based on what?
Based on they're not applying the law evenly and consistently. So I'm very happy if thugs are arrested and charged promptly and an appropriate sentence handed out, but that should apply throughout. The Hare Hill riots were the first riots.
But I'm going to dig, because I share your sentiments exactly. Why do you believe that Keir Starmer is, let's call it, why?
Because he and the left, the truth is that many of the rioters in Hare Hills were from the left or the far left, and they get treated differently from those on the right or the far right. Now, I've got no truck with anybody rioting. Far left, near right, far right. I don't care. You don't riot. It's very simple. But we live in a two-tier policing society now. It's a two-tier police state where the far left are treated with kid gloves compared to the far right.
Why?
Who are
Why?
Because you better ask Keir Starmer bluntly. What I know is it's completely unacceptable. Here's another thing that infuriates me: the two thugs caught on CCTV beating the living daylights out of 3 police officers.
Absolutely.
Who had to use tasers in Manchester Airport on July the 23rd. 3 weeks later, they've still not been charged.
I know.
You don't need any more clear evidence, right?
I mean, this is. I've been saying it for 2 days.
If you use CCTV to arrest and charge the thugs from these recent riots, fine. Then use the CCTV and arrest and charge the similar type of thugs who happen probably be from the left or the far left, who beat the living daylights out of those police officers in Manchester Airport. Yet more proof of the two-tier policing. And here's the point. It's not the police on the front line who are responsible for this. It's the leadership of the police and the leadership that's coming down from the Home Office and the CPS. And it is completely and utterly unacceptable. What Starmer is doing, he is creating a sort of police state where people are now terrified what they put on social media. I'm starting some of my tweets, slightly ironically, just to wind a few people up. If this is true, ... in recognition of a lady who put out a tweet that was turned out to be erroneous, and she put, if this is true, ... and yet she's still been arrested. And because apparently she supposedly incited a riot.
Taking it to a different thing that I said for the last couple of days. So if the police, the two-tier thing for me is, I completely agree with you, but if you can suddenly mobilise, Richard, all these police who apparently we didn't have, who are apparently too busy doing the Macarena and filling out forms, if suddenly we can mobilise all this police, I'm actually not talking about, in this instance, I'm talking about the people who are in a shop, who the police won't come round when they've had £199 of stuff nicked. Hard-earned working people who are being screwed because the police don't get there. Old people, young people being burgled, nobody comes. And when they do, they just get a crime number and nobody ever comes. My father-in-law, I keep telling the story, 79, never had a new car. Bought one 6 months ago, devastated, had it nicked. Car insurance gone up 5 times, right? 79 years of age. And what does he find out from Keir Starmer? We're going to release that petty criminal after about 5 weeks because that's not fair. If you're going to do it, fair play. Do it across the board. Go out and stop and search people. Get the knives off the street. Load them onto television cameras and get them in court.
No, you can't stop and search, Jeremy, because that might upset some people from certain communities who feel that is wrong. The evidence is crystal clear that the more stop and search you do, the less knife crime there is.
Peter Bleksley said on this show yesterday that 83% of knives in London are found on black men. That is not made up. That's not a racist comment. That is not in any way. Anybody that carries a knife.
Do you know the people who most want stop and search back? It's the mothers of black teenagers, because that is the group who tragically suffer the most from violent deaths from knife crime. And yet you've got Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer who don't want more stop and search because they might think that it's inappropriately used.
Well, listen, take a breath, because I've got something I've got something very interesting for you. This afternoon, one of the would-be Tory leadership hopefuls, Tom Tugendhat, ex-security minister, is a major speech, didn't go down very well, and this is what he said about Sir Keir Starmer handling the riots. Have a listen, RT.
This has been the government's first real test, and the Prime Minister fell short. When we needed a strong government, we got a party in the mindset of opposition. We needed a leader. We got a lawyer waiting for the case to reach court. These are early days for the government, and government isn't easy, but government isn't a game either. It is more than press releases and retweets, and you can't be wise with hindsight, something Labour mastered in opposition. You have to be determined and aware throughout. You have to be ready to do the job from day one.
This is a man who was a minister of the Tory government who had 14 years, Richard Tice. That's about the most uninspiring speech I've ever heard. He's essentially as boring as Keir Starmer. What the hell's that all about?
Well, it mustn't be too rude, but I wasn't sure what was more interesting, his speech or the brown background. He doesn't seem to have a sort of a leadership logo, but anyway, there we go. That's their problem, not mine. Look, this is completely unacceptable at every level, and free speech is now seriously under threat on social media because of the sense of fear that is being created. And what they're actually trying to do is to suppress and to label and to smear anybody who wants to talk about difficult, sensitive issues around immigration, be it legal or illegal. That's
you won't have heard this, but we had a really interesting interview earlier with Christian Niemitz, who's the editorial director for the IEA. He wrote a column in the Daily Telegraph today, and he said that when it was Twitter, right, and it wasn't run by Musk, the bedwetters, the left, loved it. It was their forum. Suddenly, because Musk has said this should be equally and consistent, so we'll put stuff on the right as well as the left, because that's what a debate should be, they're up in arms, the Labour Party, today. We're going to leave it. It's outrageous. It's pro-right. But for years, it's been left-leaning. To me, it's a bit like the conversations I have with my daughters the whole time. You have your beliefs at your university, but I have mine. And you have yours, but I am entitled to mine. If you don't have that balance, Richard, how do you ever have a debate that works?
Well, I tell you what, this is going to get a lot worse over the coming months. Based on what we've seen just in the first few weeks, you are going to see changes to the online safety laws. And what we've seen in Scotland will be coming down to England, I fear, with sort of hate crime legislation online. And this is, as I say, it is a way of suppressing debate about sensitive, really strategically important issues for the country, but the last thing the Labour Party wants to talk about, which is how do you stop the boats? How do you stop the illegal migrants coming over? Over 800 in just the last 2 days alone. That is a massive, massive bill. Figures released today showing that the asylum seeker bill in the 12 months to, I think, April 24, now up at 6.6 billion. 5 years ago,
but I would never, I hope we're friends. You are wrong, Richard Tice MP for Boston and Skegness, because today, Keir Starmer, this is an extraordinary combination, that little and large, and Giorgia Meloni, that's a socialist left-wing prime minister and a far-right, well, not far-right, see, I've done it now, a right-wing politician, plot an overhaul of Europe-wide police forces to tackle immigration. So not only is he going to have a riot police force of 6,000, I didn't think we had any coppers, he's now going to create a Europe-wide police force to tackle illegal migration. Where's the money for that coming from? How's that going to happen?
It's just more bureaucracy and it's more waffle. And I'm afraid that's what we hear from the two main parties, in my view. We hear all these strong words. You know, you heard it from Tom Tugendhat just then. But look, the reality is that it's the Tories created this illegal migrant crisis by not dealing with it, by not picking up and turning back the boats years ago. And then this cost, I mean, this multi-billion-pound cost every year that's going up. I mean, next year it'll be 10 billion. And how would reform? Okay, here's something that I'm interested in, and if you can't answer this, I understand that, but if reform was in a position to be involved in the process, because sat here while the Tory party suggested Rwanda and spent billions and billions of pounds, we've now got a Labour government 2 months in who want to set up a border force SAR, and they want to set up a committee here and an illegal... I'm not as intelligent as you lot, you're MPs. There's 170,000 people who are waiting to be processed, right? So why don't you train 1,000 people, create a building, process those people. If they're illegal, get them out of this country as soon as possible. And if not, give them the accreditation and put them into this country. Why do we have to have this conversation about processing these people, be it in Rwanda or somewhere else? Why can't we do it in the United bloody Kingdom? And if we don't agree with these people, get them out. I'll tell you why, and I'll reveal something exclusively for you, information I've just gathered over the last few days. So you've got human rights lawyers. Very often these asylum seekers are claiming that they're children, even though they look about their late 20s with a very long, mature beard. But no, apparently they're 16 or 17. And the sensible thing is you can do a very quick medical test on the palm, on the wrist, job done. No, that's in breach of their human rights. And so what they're doing is they're using legal aid to claim a judicial review as to whether or not it is allowable to check their age. And this whole process is going on and on and on, and it is consuming taxpayers' cash.
And we're paying for the human left,
of course.
Human rights
we're paying
laws,
for all of it. And it delays it, and you get the judicial review, which is months down the track. And on this stuff goes in order to prove they're children. And of course, once they're children, if If they do prove that, then that means they can bring the whole family over. Happy days. And that's all at our expense too. I mean, this is completely and utter insanity. And here's the choice that the Labour Party are making, and Keir Starmer's making. He's basically choosing to make pensioners poorer and colder and die early in order to fund this growing asylum seeker bill. That is the choice that this government is making. What Reform would do is pick up and take back, which, by the way, the Labour Party did once about 3 weeks ago, which they admitted they're legally entitled to do. If you do that, every single boat you pick up, you take back, this whole thing stops in about 3 weeks. And I've been saying it for 1.5 to 2 years now, and no one has been able to prove me wrong. But none of them have got the spine, the guts, the courage to get the job done.
Completely agree. Final story. It's lovely to have you on. You talk about human rights. You talk about how we live now in a country where people take advantage, it seems, of a system, whether that's benefits, whether that's... I mean, honestly, ridiculous. Control yourself, Deputy Leader of Reform. 5 Just Stop Oil activists, who were convicted for conspiring to block the M25. Good. Did you not see the footage? My daughter won't be able to go to her brother's wedding. Tough. I hope she rots. Anyway, they've appealed against their record sentences. They're claiming that the terms breached international human rights law as they're longer than the terms being carried out to rioters, and they want the government to fund those lawyers to help them fight against the government. I mean, the taxpayer. Richard Tice, the world's gone nuts.
Actually, I was rather pleased with the sentences they got, and I tweeted out good. And I tweeted out good, and I hope they serve the full term, and I hope that acts as a proper deterrent, because that's actually what punishment through sentencing is supposed to do, is to be a deterrent. So excellent, and let's hope there's no more of these ridiculous, selfish, eco-zealot riots that and protests that cause such complete carnage.
Do you think we've gone soft in this country? Final question, Richard. I think we've gone soft.
Oh, I think that the country's gone soft on the left, but what we're seeing from Starmer and his henchmen is that it's anybody on the middle right or further right. They are going in, essentially they're trying to suppress you, smear you and silence you. That is what is going on, and it's utterly disgraceful.
Richard Tice, as ever, a real pleasure. Thank you for taking time out. Richard Tice MP for Boston and Skegness.